Liberal politicians tell us that mass immigration is solely about helping out our fellow man, but is there something more nefarious at play? Elon Musk has been sounding the alarm on mass immigration in ways that very few in the mainstream are willing to talk about. Across the United States, Europe, and especially in my home country of Canada, we've seen migration explode over the last few years. This has all happened under the watch of globalist liberal governments, and it's no coincidence. Just think about it. The integration of millions of people into new countries is bound to affect the political fabric and landscape of those countries. And this injection of those new people will inevitably shape the outcome of these countries forever. And it's not just a matter of helping out new faces. I myself come from immigrant families on both my mother and my father's side. But taking feelings out of it, practically speaking, when you inject millions of people into a new country, like for example what has happened in Canada over the last year, that's bound to reshape the national identity and fabric of that country, and maybe even democracy itself. Recently, California passed a bill removing voter ID requirements altogether.
California just passed, which is shocking, it's hard to believe this is even real, but California just passed a law making it illegal to require voter ID in any election at all in California.
I've been pondering on this new law for quite a bit, and I can't for the life of me figure out why they would think that this is a good idea. Is this really about protecting voters, or could this be a deliberate tactic to sway election outcomes? Supporters of this legislation claim that it's racist to demand that voters show ID at the booths, as Black and Latino voters are less likely to have access to identification. I, for one, think that it's actually racist to imply that Black and Latino voters can't get ID. You need identification for essentially every part of life. To drive a car, to buy cigarettes, to buy alcohol, to take out a library book, to get a loan, open a bank account, to get a cell phone. You even need to show ID to get a Costco membership.
Guys and gals, let me tell you, a breakfast glizzy at 10 a.m. will change your life.
I would think that voting on the outcome of your city, state, and country would require a little bit of a higher level of scrutiny and security, but that's just me. If you're aware of something that I'm not as to why it's important to not require ID for people to vote, please enlighten me in the comments. Now, assuming that this isn't just about race, because typically when they tell us it's about something, it's really about something else, at least in my opinion. What's really at stake here, and who's actually benefiting from legislation like this? We're being told it's about inclusivity, but could this be part of a broader agenda? When you can't prove who's voting, how can you ensure safe elections? To prove a point, Canadian real estate developer Clint Murphy, no, not Canadian-born American citizen, Canadian citizen real estate developer Clint Murphy, took advantage of this lack of voter ID law and drove down to the United States and actually voted for Donald Trump. Not worried about the ramifications of doing such a thing, he bragged about it on X. So if it was this easy for a Canadian citizen, Clint Murphy, to vote in the United States election and essentially commit voter fraud, how many other foreign nationals are doing the exact same thing? Why does there seem to be a concerted effort to degrade the most sacred democratic institution of all? Could the mass immigration play be solely to harvest votes? Elon Musk seems to think so.
But California just passed a law making it illegal to require voter ID in any election at all in California.
Have they extended the same...
Actually what's going on right now. By the way, they're proud of it. They're not hiding it.
But it's only voting. It's not buying a gun or buying liquor or buying a pack of cigarettes or flying on an airplane or renting a hotel room. It's only voting that it's illegal to do.
Oh, if you try to buy a gun, I mean, they're going to ID you 6 ways a Sunday. Yeah, California's trying to make it basically illegal to own a gun. Mm-hmm. And the same people that demanded vaccine IDs for if you want to travel or do anything are the same ones who say no voter ID is required.
Is there any reason
Obviously hypocritical.
to pass a law like that except to abet voter fraud?
It's so that fraud cannot be proven. So it enables large scale fraud and no way to prove it, because how would you prove it? It's literally impossible. No ID. You're not even allowed to show your ID. It's insane.
This isn't just happening in the United States, it's happening in Europe and Canada as well. In fact, in 2024, Canada had a larger population growth due to immigration than natural-born citizens. Think about that for a second. The immigration rate is largely outpacing the birth rate in Canada. How could that not reshape the fabric of the country? This is all happening in front of a backdrop of a massive unaffordability crisis in the West. Groceries, shelter, and healthcare are more expensive than ever. In Canada, we're seeing unemployment spike while simultaneously bringing in record numbers of temporary workers. In the United States, we're seeing hundreds of thousands of people flooding the southern border, largely unvetted, and receiving prepaid debit cards for thousands of dollars when they get here, while simultaneously seeing the largest cities in the West littered with homelessness and displaced veterans.
2,000 migrants who crossed into southern Mexico on Sunday say time is of the essence, saying they're afraid of asylum changes under a new president come January, worried that this is their last chance to get into the country. People are understandably upset, but if you point out this disparity, you're often called a racist or a xenophobe or a white supremacist or some other ad hominem. So the question remains, why is this happening simultaneously all over the world, and who's benefiting from it? Because it's obviously not the average citizen. Elon Musk has been sounding the alarm, not just about immigration, but about national security as a whole. And when one of the most prolific thinkers of our generation starts speaking out, it's worth paying attention. You don't have to be a rocket scientist like Elon Musk to look at the potential cause and effect that mass immigration would have on a country's sovereignty and voting demographic, especially if said country doesn't require ID to vote. Think about it.
So, yeah, the purpose of no voter ID is obviously to conduct fraud in elections. Obviously.
There can be no other explanation.
I mean, they come up with some nice sounding thing.
People don't have IDs. Could you live in this country without an ID?
Yeah, I mean, their common rebuttal is like it's racist to require ID, and which is insane. I think it's actually racist and patronizing to say that people can't figure out how to get ID, obviously.
But how could you live here without an ID? I don't think it's even possible. Yeah.
You can't do anything.
Yeah.
You need ID for everything. Like the list of things you need ID for is basically everything, except voting.
So you see the rest of the country.
It's total bullshit, obviously.
Obviously.
Yes.
But that doesn't in any way minimize the aggression or self-righteousness they bring to this conversation.
Yes.
You're a racist if you want that.
Right. Whereas, in fact, obviously, someone is racist if they say that people of a particular race cannot get ID. That's patronizing and racist. That's absurd.
Yes.
Yeah. You know, it's like when the governor of New York said people in the, ghetto don't know how to use computers or something like that. I mean, like, super out of touch.
For sure.
Yeah.
On average, it takes someone who's applying for citizenship in the United States roughly 9 to 10 years from the application process until they're approved. Now, that's also assuming that they have no criminal record, they either have family in the country, or they're largely skilled in their industry. This process is long and difficult and costs tens of thousands of dollars. Now imagine you don't qualify for any of these standards. So you decide to just walk across. And once you walk across, you're given money and a place to stay. Now, if you bring in hundreds of thousands or even millions of people and give them the same treatment, they're likely going to be loyal to you when the time to vote comes around. Call me a crazy conspiracy theorist. If this is the case, what does that mean for democracy as a whole? What does that mean for the integrity of the voting booth? Why should countries even have borders? Now listen, it's not just about policy. Corporate media plays a massive role in how these issues are portrayed and understood by the general public. It shapes public opinion in such a powerful way by deciding what stories should be amplified and what stories should be buried.
50 former national intelligence folks who said that what he's accusing me of is a Russian plant. They have said that this has all the 5 former heads of the CIA, both parties, say what he's saying is a bunch of garbage.
This is classic Trump. We have 4 days left, and all of a sudden there's a laptop. There's overwhelming evidence that from the intelligence community that the Russians are engaged.
So, Congressman, what more do we know about this report out of your subcommittee that at least 2 of the 51 intelligence officials who co-signed that letter a month before the 2020 election, falsely speculating the Hunter Biden laptop story was Russian disinformation, were on the CIA payroll as contractors? What more do we know about this?
Well, that's exactly what we know, is that, in fact, they were working for the government and didn't disclose it. And that's the important thing. It's the non-disclosure. It's the fact that they were current employees and could be influenced by exactly that.
Whether you're aware of it or not, staying ahead of news bias and propaganda is a full-time job. And even if you have the capacity to sift through the propaganda and the headlines, you're still left to connect the dots based on whatever morsels of truth either side of the media machine are throwing out at you. Why are certain stories amplified and blasted everywhere while others barely see the light of day? Why is there no accountability in the media? The old saying that it's easier to lie to somebody than to convince somebody that they've been lied to holds true. Remember the Steele dossier that Trump colluded with Russia in 2016 to win the election? And it turns out that that was a dossier that was literally paid for by Hillary Clinton and her friends.
I think it's very sad what they've done with this fake dossier. It was made up, and I understand they paid a tremendous amount of money. And Hillary Clinton always denied it. The Democrats always denied it. And now only because it's going to come out in a court case, they said, yes, they did it. They admitted it. And they're embarrassed by it. But I think it's a disgrace. It's just really it's a very sad commentary on politics in this country.
Even though that's public information, I bet you most people these days don't know that. And here's why that's dangerous. With no accountability in the media, they can just propagate a lie and say it over and over and over and over and over again. And unfortunately for people like you and me, there's repetition bias. So if we're exposed to these lies over and over and over again, eventually we just accept them as true. And once we've been convinced that these things are true, it becomes very difficult to be convinced otherwise.
The sharing of biased and false news has become all too common on social media. More alarming, some media outlets publish these same fake stories without checking facts first.
The sharing of biased and false
news has become all too common on social media.
More alarming, some media outlets publish these same fake stories without checking facts first.
Unfortunately, some members of the media use their platforms to push their own personal bias and agenda to control exactly what people think, and this is extremely dangerous to our democracy.
These policies and narratives and even the media itself, everything seems to me anyways to be designed to push a certain agenda. They claim that it's about inclusion and fairness, but in my opinion, it's just about power. Policies on immigration, on voting, and on citizenship, they're all shaping who has a voice and who stays in control. And the impact won't just be felt in the coming years in whatever country you're from, but for generations. Although I agree with the fundamentals of what Elon Musk is saying, in my opinion, things go a bit deeper than that. Liberal governments have placed themselves as moral arbiter in society. And this is a sentiment that you see commonly with liberal voters. The people that don't agree with them are bad.
We're used to casual homophobic comments from the other side of the House. Mr. Speaker, what is it about the...
It's never about debating policy. It's always about good and evil, right and wrong, good or bad. And I think that's a gross oversimplification that's meant to manipulate us into voting a certain way. The simple reality is that countries need people. An economy requires labor or human capital to function. If you don't have people, you don't have an economy. And if you don't have an economy, you don't have a country. It's that simple. The harsh reality is that Western nations are just not having children. Now, there are a few factors that are contributing to this, whether it be affordability or progressive ideologies or good old-fashioned hedonism. People just aren't having kids. If people aren't having children and population is dwindling, remember what I said about requirements for an economy? So that means liberal nations have no choice but to import mass labor. In my opinion, and this is if you just look at the numbers, I'm not talking about anecdotes or personal stories or social causes or anything like that. Strictly looking at the data. The West, North America especially, is so addicted to abortion that it has no choice but to offset the declining birth rates from abortion by mass immigration. And I know that sounds probably crazy to you and harsh, but according to the NRLC, there have been over 63 million abortions in the United States since the implementation of Roe v. Wade. That's an unfathomable number, especially when you consider that most of these abortions were happening in minority communities.
I care about the fact that there's more black babies being aborted than born in New York City at this point. That 50% of black death in America is abortion.
Not only that, a lot of these aborted children would have went on to be parents and even grandparents. If only half of these 63 million had only one child, we're talking about a population boost of over 100 million people in the United States. You really mean to tell me that another 100 million black and brown lives in the United States wouldn't impact the fabric of the society at large? It would have no change on voting patterns or proliferation of minority communities? Things that make you go, Liberal governments in the West are in a really difficult position because the social issues, which are the framework for their whole liberal ethos, are the antithesis of a growing birth rate. Now, again, live your life how you want to live your life, but you can't make the argument to me that a policy like abortion or gay marriage or trans is growing the population rate. You hear that argument offset by things like, oh, there's too many humans anyways, and there's not enough water, and there's not enough land. Well, if you look at a place like Canada, where most of the population lives within 20 kilometers of the southern border, we've got nothing but land and natural resources. Not only that, the desalination of ocean water has been proven. We have the technology to do it, and it's really cheap. In fact, it's so cheap that no one wants to do it, and that's the problem.
We want to move to a sustainable energy economy as quickly as possible, but we're not in any danger of resource collapse.
But lots of people don't have enough food or water. Water, we will run out of water. They're running out of sand.
No, Earth is 70% water by surface area.
But you can't drink that.
But desalination is absurdly cheap.
Liberal governments are also against cheap energy. Therefore, they are unable to offset the economic drag of a falling birth rate through oil and gas, or forestry, or coal. I'm not talking about this from a social agenda perspective. I'm literally talking about this from a dollars and cents perspective. So, like I said, liberal governments are in quite a dilemma. The problem is, they don't trust people like you and me to be able to handle the truth and the reality of the economic situation the West is in. They divide us and they fight for our vote based on social issues. And that's been the playbook since the beginning. If you just stumbled on my channel and this is your first time seeing my content, you might be a little bit upset about what I just told you. But the fact of the matter is, numbers don't lie. I'm only briefly touching on this concept today, but if you'd like to see more videos like this in the future, please let me know in the comments. If you found value in this video, please do me a favor to like and subscribe, and even share this video with someone who might find value in this different perspective. And I know in times of uncertainty, it can be easy to get down and be afraid, but don't forget, the truth will set you free in these strange times. By the way, what's with all these woke celebrities turning into Trump supporters?